Playbook Your Passion, a roadmap for your success. There's a real good chance that what you are doing now, the reason that you are here, is that you're passionate about what you're doing. And so what we want you to do is to be strategic about that passion. And how are you going to use that to grow your business, to grow your leadership, and to grow into your next step? Quick introduction about me and about our company. I've been in the media. I'm one of those terrible media people that you just heard about. I've been in the media in this city for more than 20 years. 20 years ago, we started Game Day Communications with my business partner, Jackie Rowe, from whom you will be hearing later on this afternoon. We are very fortunate in that we have clients around the country. We are based here in Cincinnati. And over the years, many times we have worked with Procter & Gamble on all kinds of different projects, Flying Pig Marathon, Kroger Queen City Championship, of course, the LPGA stop, the Cincinnati Music Festival that P&G has been such a supporter of over the years. We work with the CVB, the Cincinnati Reds. We work with the Cincinnati Chamber and our Cincinnati Fair Esports. Again, you will be hearing a little bit more about that as we go. But just talking about the basics. What is a playbook? What is a playbook? You know, you think about the playbook that the football players get in the spring. Similar to that. It's a set of rules, suggestions, or methods that are suitable for a particular activity, industry, job. It's a set of rules, suggestions, or methods. And I want you to physically have a playbook. You got like little notebooks today, and I want you to use that not just during this session, but throughout the day and throughout these 4.5 sessions that we'll be having, to really use that to map out what you want to do and how you're going to do it. So I want you to have a physical playbook and write down so many of these points. Before we get going, I want everybody to stand up. It's early, so let's just stand up, get the blood going. If you had your coffee, be able to stand up. And as I say, I know that I've met a lot of you the last time that we got together at Kenwood, but I haven't met everybody. Catherine's back there and Susan's over there, and so I've met some of you, but I haven't met all of you, so I kind of want to do like a group introduction right now. So how many of you go by Honey? Honey. How about Sweetheart? Anybody go by Sweetheart? Or the more familiar Sweetie? Sweetie? Hey, Sweetie. Or how about Babe? Babe? Very nice to meet you. Very nice to meet all of you. Or in the vernacular, Bae. Hey, Bae. We've all been called that. Sometimes we answer. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes they don't know our name, but sometimes they do. And you're still called Sweetie or Babe. This is something that I don't care how many generations that will go through this, it's going to happen. But what I want you to do is to make sure when you put together this playbook, when you hear about what we're going to be talking about today, not just this session, but throughout the day, what we're going to be talking about how you tell your story, I want to make sure that not just that they know your name, but I want to make sure that they want to know your name. And that's our goal for today. All right, you can sit down now. You don't have to stand for the whole thing. But as I ask you to stand up, I mean, you didn't hesitate. You stood up. You felt comfortable standing up in this environment. You're sitting with people that you know or you've met. You're sitting with people, you look around the room, and it's people that look like you. And so you were very comfortable standing up. That wasn't a big deal. Would you have been as comfortable if you were in a room where you were the only person who looked like you? Would you have been that comfortable? As you just heard in the panel discussion, we have a tendency, we're in a room, and we're the only person who looks like us. We have a tendency to sit back and we be quiet and we watch and we take notes, and we don't really say a lot. But again, as you heard, you are in that room, you are at that table for a reason. So we want you to have that confidence to be able to sit there at that table and feel confident enough to be engaged, to be involved, to be productive. So in these sessions that we're going to go through today, you're going to learn how to tell an engaging story about yourself and your business. You're going to learn how to present that story in media interaction, in conversation, on social channels. You see how others have turned those everyday conversations into a wow moment, and understand the importance of preparation for when you do this. We are going to prepare you for that today. So let me start out by telling a little story about myself. So a lot of times I am asked, well, how'd you get into sports? Because still, there aren't that many women who are involved in sports, and I've been very fortunate to have had a career in sports. How'd you get in sports? So here's my story. So my story is that, it wasn't my father who was the sports nut, it was my mother. My mother and I would sit there, and back when it was only 4 bowl games on New Year's Day, Mom and I would sit there in front of the television, and we'd watch the Cotton Bowl, 11 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go all the way down to the Orange Bowl at night, at midnight. That's where I got my love of sports. And so I lived out in the country and didn't really have a neighborhood to play with the kids, so I'd go back in the backyard and I'd shoot hoops. Had the hoop up there on the big tree outside, the walnut tree, and so I'd shoot hoops. So every once in a while, my mother would come out, and she would play basketball with me. And so she has the basketball. I'm on defense, I'm in my defensive stance. So she comes in, gets ready to shoot. I put my hands up to guard her, pop her in the nose, blood everywhere. I mean, it's awful. Anytime you have a cut or anything around your nose, it just bleeds. I thought I had broken my mother. I'm screaming, I'm crying. She goes, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And it was thankfully just a bloody nose, not a broken nose. So I'm at school the next day and I'm telling my classmates about this. I thought I broke my mother here and this blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, how could you do that to your mother? I said, she was driving the lane. What else do you expect me to do? And they go, oh, well, yeah, we understand. So, so they understood. But when anybody asks me how I got into sports, that's my story. So I tell them about that. And yes, for one reason or another, it's a memorable story. So, as I say, I've been very fortunate to be involved in sports. I spent 5 years at ESPN. And if you're a sports fan, boy, that's where you want to be. Every resource, every dime, everybody there is dedicated to covering sports. And it's so much fun to be there. But I show you this. It's a banner, and you see them all the time, either when you go to a UC game or a Xavier game or when you see it on television. They always have ESPN banners around the gym or on the football field. So what we would do at ESPN is, like, let's say, for example, a charity would call up and say, do you have something from ESPN that we can auction as a fundraiser? So what we would do is we would go downstairs to the library, get one of these banners, and we'd hang them up in the office area. And there was a corridor that went down the middle of the office area. And, we'd put a sign up, could you sign this banner for such and such charity? So when the anchors would go by, they would stop and they would sign the banner. Well, this is a banner that I got for a local charity. I was also emceeing that particular event. And I'm watching the bidding on this banner, and I go, well, that's not raising a whole lot of money. So I ended up buying the banner, and here's why. Again, if you watch ESPN, you know some of these names. Chris Berman here, been there forever. Butchie down here in the corner, he does a lot of hockey. Dan Patrick, of course, he's a local kid. The thing about this banner is, at the time when I started ESPN, there were about, 57 anchors across SportsCenter, ESPN2, about 57 anchors. At that time, 5 were women. Out of 57 anchors, 5 were women. There's my signature, there's Pam Ward, there's Linda Cohn. Up here in the corner is Chris McKendry. And over here, you can just barely see her, is Robin Roberts, right there. So this banner means a lot to me because it represents the 5 of us who kind of had our own sorority there in Bristol, Connecticut, because it was just the 5 women who were there. We weren't the first, and thankfully there are so many more women there who are anchoring, who are working sidelines, who are doing amazing work there at ESPN. We weren't the first, thankfully we weren't the last, but at that particular time, we were the only. We were the only 5 women. And that's why that banner means so much to me, because all 5 of us signed it. And it means something to represent what we did and what we added to the legacy and the history of ESPN. But being in sports, one of the cool things about being in sports is you get to talk to some awesome people. You get to interview, you get to meet some amazing folks. And a few years ago, Abby Wambach was in town for a lecture, and I had the opportunity, I had the honor to moderate. Abby Wambach had just retired from soccer, and you don't even have to know a whole lot about soccer to know that she was an extraordinary player, one of the best, male or female, to ever come out of this country. And she retired with World Cups and gold medals and all kinds of honors. And if you have an opportunity to read her book, Forward, it's a really good book, and she is very, very honest about some of the struggles, some of the very public struggles that she has had over the years to succeed. So Abby is talking to this crowd, and there's Q&A going on. And one of the women in the crowd said to her, "You're so very accomplished in what you have done in soccer. Now that you're retired, do you think that everything that you have done in the past has prepared you for even greater things in the future?" And right then, Glennon Doyle, who was with her, they are now married, but she was with her, Glennon Doyle stood up in the crowd and cheered. And you might see that in the background, both Abby and I are going, "What?" Because Glennon said later that I have been telling Abby that forever, that as successful as she has been, and she has been, that's just setting the stage for her platform to succeed even more in the future. So many of you have been amazingly successful already. But think about that as just being a platform to be even more successful and to tell your story in the future. 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, I had the opportunity of all these awesome people that I've interviewed, put it together in a book, Playing Ball with the Boys. And it's a book that really talks to women who have made a first in some area of men's sports. First female referee, first female coach for a men's basketball team, et cetera, et cetera. And each one of these women didn't know me from Adam, but without an exception, every one of these women that I contacted wanted to tell their story. And you see a theme going on here about telling your story and getting it out, because you want to be an inspiration. And you want to make sure that you inspire the next generation. Janet Guthrie is probably the smartest person I've ever interviewed in my life. As she was on vacation and she said, yes, call me at this number. It's my brother's cell phone. As soon as we're done, obliterate the number. Obliterate? How about just delete or erase or, forget it? No, so I obliterated it. So Janet Guthrie, she had her pilot's license in high school. Her dad was a pilot for Eastern Airlines. Had her pilot's license in high school. She went to Michigan on an engineering scholarship. She got bored with engineering. Along the way, took up race car driving. Drove a long time in Europe. Road circuits. She drove the Can-Am series. In 1977, she made history as the first woman to drive in the Daytona 500. The first woman to drive in the Daytona 500. Now that's a pretty good clip right there. That's a pretty good landmark right there. But not only did she in 1977 become the first woman to drive at Daytona for the Daytona 500, she then, that same year, that spring, she became the first woman to qualify into the field for the Indianapolis 500. 1977 was a big year for Janet Guthrie. Breaking into probably one of the more masculine of men's sports, racing. She made history, in both races, a $10 part, that's all it takes, breaks, you don't finish. She didn't finish either race, but she started and she qualified and she made history. That's pretty good. So in 1978, the next year, she decides that, I think I want to run Indianapolis again. As you know, and P&G has certainly been part of this, years ago, the Tide Ride with Darrell Waltrip got a lot of airtime. If you are a sponsor of a car, what you want is you want eyeballs on that car and on your driver. Janet Guthrie certainly had that year before because she was the first female. She had eyeballs. That's what sponsors want. So she goes back to Indianapolis in the spring of 1978, and she can't get a car. None of the car owners would hire her. Couldn't get a ride. So she had a choice to make. She goes, I've kind of made history. I can go home and I can write books and I can do lectures. I can be happy with this. Instead of taking all those no's, what she did, she borrowed an engine, she borrowed a chassis. She put together her own race team. She probably went to the Texaco station on the corner of 16th and Speedway and got 4 guys who were working at the Texaco station and said, hey, can you come work on my car? However she did it, she put together a race team. And in 1978, with that race team that you see right there, with a team that she put together on a shoestring, she finished in the top 10 of the Indianapolis 500. She figured out a way to do it. When no one would hire her, she did it herself. And sometimes we have to do that. All of us have to do that. If it's not available to us, we figure out a way to do it ourselves. And that's exactly what Janet Guthrie did. Tina Kunzler Murphy is not necessarily a household name, not like Janet Guthrie is, but Tina is, believe it or not, a native of Las Vegas. How many people can say that? She was born in Las Vegas, went to school at UNLV on a tennis scholarship. After she graduated, she became a graduate student there, and she became tennis coach. Tennis coach at UNLV, that's a pretty good gig. So she's walking down the hall one day, and her athletic director calls at her and said, Tina, come into the office. Right? He says, Tina, have you ever thought about getting into administration, into being like an assistant athletic director? She goes, well, no. So, I really like coaching. I like working with student athletes. It's a lot of fun. I like recruiting. Now, I love being a coach. He said, are you sure that you've never thought about being an administrator? She goes, no. I said, I'm happy being a coach. And he said, well, that's too bad because I'm going to cut the tennis program. I'm going to eliminate the tennis program here. And so she thought for a second. She goes, you know what? I have always wanted to be an athletic administrator. And so she became an assistant AD. Went up the ranks. When her boss got a new job, she became the athletic director. Guess what the first thing that she did? She brought back tennis. She brought back tennis. But the reason I was able to talk to her is because she became the first woman to be the executive director of a Division I football bowl game. She was the executive director for several years for the Las Vegas Bowl. First female to do that. And then she had a couple other jobs. She went back to UNLV. She is there today in their development department. But she is someone who was able to take that barrier, figure a way around it, and to make her career even more successful than maybe she had ever dreamed. Kim Eng is one of the people that I interviewed in the book that you knew that she was destined to do something really special. She was born in Indianapolis, went to school in Chicago, got an internship with the Chicago White Sox. And she came along at the right time because it was when, if you remember, Moneyball, and whether it's the Brad Pitt movie or whether it's the book, really that was the intro into using statistics in baseball instead of the scout chewing on the cigar with the speed gun. They started using statistics, which seems so natural now, but it was pretty groundbreaking 15, 20 years ago. So she came in at a time when she loved stats, and she would put together all these stats for all these clubs. Well, she had an opportunity to intern with the Chicago White Sox. And MLB has a wonderful diversity program, and they really encourage inclusiveness in bringing people up through the ranks. And through that, she was able to, as you can see, earn a ring with the Yankees. When I interviewed her, she was assistant general manager with the Dodgers. She worked for a while with Joe Torre in Major League Baseball, and then 2 years ago, became the first woman to be a general manager of a Major League Baseball team. And she always said that without the opportunities that she had for the MLB inclusion programs, that she would not have gotten that kind of experience to really work for the Tiffany franchises of MLB, to be able to work for the Yankees, work for the Dodgers, and work for MLB. But she took advantage of the opportunities that were out there to network, to have a mentor, to get that advice, to work her way up. And that's one reason why we are all together, and you have coaches and you have people here who are here to help you, who are here to be your mentors. They are here for you to bounce ideas and questions off of. You know, it worked for Kim Ng. It got her for where she wanted to go. And it works for you as well. How many got to see Hamilton when it was here in town? Did you get to see it? Yeah, it's a great show. It's a great show. But the one thing that really sticks in my mind, if you remember, Aaron Burr gets a case of it about 2/3 of the way into the show. He gets a case of it because everybody is in the back room and they're figuring out the history of America, and he's not there. He does the whole room where it happens. Now, I don't want you to be Aaron Burr. For several reasons, I don't want you to be Aaron Burr. But I want you to take that thought. Aaron Burr kind of envisioned himself as one of the founding fathers of this country. Didn't quite work out that way, but he really thought that he should have been in that room. He wasn't, never got over it, and Alexander Hamilton kind of paid the price for it. But he wanted to be in that room where it happens. You want to be in that room where it happens. You want to make sure that you are there when those decisions are made. That's why we, the collective we, that's why we take golf lessons so we can go play golf. So those decisions are not made on the golf course without us. That's why we learn to drink bourbon and we go to bourbon tastings. Because we don't want those decisions to be made at a bourbon tasting that I'm not part of. You want to be there in that room. And you need to find any way that you can to get there. One of the most memorable interviews that I think I have done took all of about 6 minutes, 6.5. Billie Jean King. I'm really not here for Jo Beth selling books, but her book, All In, it's been out for about a year now. It is an eye-opening account of the business of tennis, from youth tennis all the way up. And as you know, Billie Jean King worked so hard and works to this day for equality, for equal pay for men and women tennis players, for equal pay across the board. And she really puts her money literally where her mouth is. She is an owner of the Dodgers. She is an owner of the new LA women's soccer team, pro soccer team. So she is out there and she is really telling the story of equality and the work that she did in particular to bring that about. If you read the book or if you have seen the movie Battle of the Sexes, again, it's an eye-opening account of how the business of tennis works. The WTA, if you've been out to the Western and Southern Open, you're very familiar with the WTA, now a combined ATP and WTA event. We've had the women there for 10 plus years now. But it all started because the tour at that time would not pay equal purses to the female players. And they just said, well, nobody comes to watch the women play, they all come to watch the men. We know now that that's not necessarily true. But back then, that was the rationale. So what the original 9 is what they're called. The original 9 did was they all invested $1. That is $1 that they're holding up. Symbolic, yes, but they all invested $1 to start a brand new tour. Might remember it was called Virginia Slims there for a while. It's been several names, but it was the birth of the WTA. Because Billie Jean King wanted to find a way to make this an equal purse sport. She wasn't getting it from the people who were organizing stops at that particular time. So what she did, and what these 9 did, they started their own tour. And as we know, it became successful and now has become the WTA that is wildly successful. The 3 traits that all these women that I've talked about, 3 traits that they had in their playbook, they were focused. They were focused on what they wanted to do. I'm going to drive in the Indianapolis 500. I am going to get equal pay for female tennis players. They were flexible. They were flexible in how they were going to reach that goal. Very seldom will you go from point A to point B in a straight line and not have anything stop you. Very seldom. If it happens, celebrate it. Doesn't happen all that often. Point A to point B doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have to be flexible in how you're going to get to point B, whatever your point B is. And they were fierce in making their own opportunities. What Billie Jean King did was not popular in the tennis glitterati. It was not a popular move. She was a rebel. And it took a while to be accepted. They were accepted because people started buying tickets and they started going to women's tennis. And going back to those eyeballs on race car drivers, selling tickets all of a sudden woke all the tennis administrators up and go, oh, people do want to see women play tennis. Yes, they do. They were focused, they were flexible, and they were fierce in making their own opportunities. And these are parts of your playbook that you can add. As I said, I got a good 6.5 minutes of Billie Jean King. We were at, actually, that's right in front of the Diamond Club at Great American Ballpark. She was in town, if you remember, several years ago. Well, it would have been in 2010. The Reds had civil rights games, and they would honor civil rights leaders. She was being honored this particular game. So I got the interview with her downstairs, and as we wrapped up, I put my hand out and I said, you've heard this a million times, but I have to say it. Thank you for doing everything that you have done and all the stuff that you've had to put up with over the years. Thank you so much for doing what you have done to allow me to do what I'm doing today in sports. And you know how like you shake hands and like you take your 2 hands and grab onto the other person's hand. So she took her hands around mine. She says, that's nice. But let me ask you something. How do they treat you here? How do they treat you here? I'd never had anybody ask me that in my life. How do they treat you here? So I had to give her like a 15-second synopsis of my career. Said I've been here in the Cincinnati market for some 20 years. Said I've grown up with so many of these guys who are here at the ballpark and here in the media. We've grown up together. They know my work. They respect my work. And so, yes, they treat me very well. And she said, good. Pay it forward. Pass it on. Pay it forward and pass it on. It's so simple, but it is so true. To pay it forward, what you have done, your success, and bring up the next generation. I always tell people if I'm speaking to a law firm or a business, and I always say it's nice to be the first female partner, but don't be the only. Don't be the last. Because if we're there, it's nice that you have made this contribution, but don't be the last one. I referenced Pam Ward on that ESPN banner. Pam Ward for years did play-by-play college football. She was the first woman at ESPN to do college football play-by-play. And so when I was interviewing her for the book, I said, how does it feel to be a trailblazer? She said, it's hard to be a trailblazer when there's no one behind you on the trail. It's hard to be a trailblazer if there's nobody behind you on the trail. So that's why it is important for all of us to pay it forward and pass it on, to bring that next generation up, to have mentors and coaches like we have in this room today, to be able to grow that next generation of leaders, that next generation of strong women, that next generation that will take us even farther than where we are now. So playbook your passion. Get into that room where it happens. We tend to shrink where in that room when everybody else doesn't look like us. We all do it. We all do it. Instead, speak up. Be heard. You're in that room for a reason. So make sure that you're counted. Network up as well as out. See who has the job that you want. Network up as well as with your peers. Be focused on those goals. Be flexible in how you're going to reach those goals. And be fierce in fighting for that opportunity. And then finally, pay it forward and pass it on. Be a friend to the next generation. Because somewhere, when you speak to a high school class or a college class, someone in those classes will look up to you and say, I want to do that. I want to be her. So be a friend to that next generation. Pay it forward and pass it on. One more time, I want everybody to stand up. We've been sitting here for almost an hour, so stand up. And this time, I want you to look around the room. Just look around, everybody. Up and down. Look around. And I want you, the next time you are in one of those rooms where you may not feel that you fit in, when nobody else looks like you, I want you to remember this moment and look around and remember that you are not alone. You have friends, you have mentors, you have coaches, you have people who want you to succeed. And a lot of them are right here in this room. So the next time you're in that situation, remember this moment. Look around and remember that you are not alone. And I cannot wait to read your playbooks. Thank you so much.